tax time, as you can tell by the public hearing that we had earlier. Robin, if you'll go ahead with the slides. I'll give you a short presentation on how we got to the recommendation today. Next slide, please. And of course, the purpose is to provide you our recommendation for the 2022 county property tax rates. Next slide. First off, let's talk about what we're not talking about. We're not talking about school tax rates, state tax rates, or city tax rates. Next slide. What we are including are real property tax rates, personal property tax rates, motor vehicle, watercraft, and aircraft tax rates, the wooded acreage, the soils conservation, cooperative extension service, and the health department taxes, all of which you heard from today. The taxes that the county does not have in Hardin County, Hardin County does not have a county-wide occupational tax. We don't have an insurance premium tax. Hardin County does not have a public library taxing district, nor do we have fire taxing districts, or a hotel tax for the county, or a local sales or restaurant tax for the county. Next slide, please. To give you an idea of the taxes that we are talking about today, what percentage that is of the county's total budget, as you saw from our budgeting presentations earlier in the year, that we have a $55 million budget for this fiscal year. Less than $10 million of that $55 million comes from the property taxes, as you can see in those slices of the pie that's pulled out. The one in red is the one that most people are most concerned about. That's your real estate property taxes at just under $8 million and about 14.5% of our total revenue. Some of the confusion comes with the next slide of talking about two different rates that people refer to often. The first is the compensating rate, and it says here, KRS 132.010 defines the compensating tax rate as that rate which, when applied to the current year's assessment of the property subject to taxation, excluding new property added to the tax roll for the current year, will produce an amount of revenue approximately equal to that produced in the preceding year. Simply said, that means you pay about what you paid the year before in your county property tax. Now remember, when you look at your tax bill, there's a number of taxing authorities on there, so someone else may have done something different with their taxes that causes your bottom line to be different, but for each taxing authority, if they use the compensating rate, the amount of money that they collect from you, the actual tax, will be about the same. Next slide. So the compensating rate keeps the tax payment approximately the same. There's no cost for inflation added in then, or no CPI added. If the overall property value declines, then the tax rate would have to increase to keep the payment approximately the same. If the overall property values increase, the tax rate would have to decrease to keep the property taxes about the same. Next slide. Then the other rate commonly discussed is what's known as the 4% growth rate. KRS 68.245 states that the portion of a tax rate levied by the Fiscal Court, which will produce revenue exclusive of revenue from new property of more than 4% over the amount of revenue produced by the compensating rate, shall be subject to recall by the voters. This is a rate, if it's taken, where you pay more. You actually pay more in taxes than the previous year. And if it's more than 4%, then the voters would have an opportunity through petition to challenge the Fiscal Court's decision to do that. If it's 4% or less, it's left just to the Fiscal Court to do that. So the 4% growth rate provides for a 4% increase approximately to the tax payment. It allows a taxing authority to account for the impact of inflation on its own budget, allows taxing authority to account for the increase in the consumer price index, and it subjects tax rate to potential voter recall if any increase produces more than a 4% increase in the tax payment. So with that said, the recommendation today that's being put forward is to adopt the compensating rate. the rate that keeps taxes at the amount of payment that you'll make about the same. For us, that will mean that we will lower the current real property tax rate of 12.0 cents per $100 of valuation down to 11.6 cents per $100 of valuation. So what does this mean for the county? Next slide. There you go. So for budget year 2022-2023, which what we're talking about, the tax rates, the real property that will be subject to the rate is about $7.25 billion, that's with a B, of property. So you can see on this slide that's being shown now, that top row there, that if the rate was left at the current rate that we established last year at 12.0 cents per $100 valuation, the gross revenue that we would expect to take in would be $8.7 million. The proposed rate, which is the same as the compensating rate, will produce about $8.4 million in gross dollars. Next slide, please. So what does that mean to the county government in net dollars? After the collection fees that the sheriff takes at 4.25% for collecting, and I might add that that provides a substantial amount of the revenue for the sheriff's office to operate, and a collection rate of approximately 99%, which is just phenomenal, the work that our sheriff's office does in collecting all of this. As you can see in the red circle there, at the proposed rate of 11.6 cents per $100 of valuation, we would expect to produce $7,979,775. Now, I don't expect any of you to remember, but our budget calls for an estimate, or it was estimated that it'd be $7,975,000. So that's pretty darn close. So going to the next slide, a little bit about the history of our tax rates. And the property tax rate that has been set below the 4% growth rate 12 out of the last 20 years, meaning that we did not take the opportunity for the 4% growth 12 out of those 20 years. Before 2003, the growth rate was always set at the 4% level. This is the 6th time in 20 years that the property tax rate has actually been reduced. That's the property tax rate been reduced. So in summary, we're recommending adopting the real property tax rate at the compensating rate of 11.6 cents per $100 valuation of real property. And the final slide, this shows you all the tax rates that we discussed today, including the Health Department, the Cooperative Extension Service, the Soil Conservation District, and the Fire Protection Fund there at the bottom of the slide. So with that, on our agenda today is Resolution 4A, which is number 2022-153, and it's approving the 2022 county property tax rates.